Hi darlings, and welcome back to Of Feathers and Fiction. Today we're going to talk about the infamous ONYX STORM, which I'm sure all of you have been hearing about non-stop for the last, 3 weeks now? Trust me, I am kind of burnt out on it too. However, I wanted to add my voice to the just growing crescendo of input on this third installment of the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros. I'm not going to give an entire summary of the book. At this point, most of you probably know what the book is about. If you want like deep dives into the actual plot and like a chapter by chapter analysis, I know there's dozens of people out there far more successful than me that have done a probably very thorough job on that. So I'm just gonna leave that to them, and I'm gonna use this as my sounding board to talk about the things that I disliked in the book. Also, some of the things I did like. Bonnie, did you like the book? By the way, Bonnie has recovered really nicely from the leg injury that she had a few weeks ago. She is cruising around and having a good time. Yeah, you're so sweet. Yeah. Do you want your mealworms? She speaks in lowercase. All right, she's got her mealworms. Bon. Disrespect your surroundings! I was really hopeful that this book was going to kind of turn the series around. I had a feeling, I was like, third time's a charm. Maybe, you know, sometimes those second books tend to be a little rough in any series. I did like ONYX STORM better than Iron Flame. It was better because one, it was a little shorter, and also Violet just wasn't as annoying. She was really difficult to tolerate in Iron Flame. I can allow some of the like annoying character flaws for a time because sometimes you need to see that in order for it to be believable that the character grows over the course of the story. Like, I get that. Just think that Violet's kind of an annoying FMC, if I'm being honest. I did not hate this book, but I did not love it either. It fell flat, again. I mean, I went into it with kind of some low expectations, but also hopeful that it would be a little bit better. The style of the writing felt just a little bit different. One of the biggest things I noticed right off the bat was the writing just felt very jolty. And I'll get into that more, but that's honestly, it took me a while to kind of get into this book, which I was disappointed by. If you love this series and you love this book, and that's great. I'm happy for you. If you don't like hearing criticism on things that you like, you're not gonna like this video, hands down, because I have more bad than good about this book. If you're okay hearing criticism on things and having a good time still, cool, we'll probably be friends. You know, sometimes it's good to have a little laugh on something. You're like, yeah, you're right, that is ridiculous. It is kind of funny. I still love it, but to start off, I'm gonna read a little summary that I wrote up about the book. Violet enters her third year at Basgiath War College, but the time for learning from books and classes has come to an end. War is on their doorstep, and everyone has to apply their knowledge, what little that may be, to fight against Venin. Violet is determined to find a cure for Xaden's curse while simultaneously denying the severity of his condition. Xaden has to wrestle with what he is now and lives in constant fear of overstepping and hurting the ones he loves. They journey past the borders of Orisha to seek alliance and to search for the Seventh Den dragons and Darna's mysterious relatives. It's a bumpy road, and not all of the people they encounter are agreeable to helping. The influence of the gods becomes increasingly clear, and Violet discovers that her connection to them may be more than she previously understood. Violet is continually thrust into leadership positions she wasn't anticipating. Though she is hesitant, she feels compelled to grit her teeth and take them on. From standing up to leadership, to forging political allies with leaders on foreign islands, to coming to grips with her own flaws and delusions, she gradually steps away from her insecure and vulnerable past self. In the end, Violet wakes after battle to find she's now married to Xaden, who is nowhere to be found. Her immediate memories have been scrubbed, leaving her with gaping holes of questions left unanswered. I don't know if that last sentence made sense. There are 3 main plot points to this book. Find the Seventh Den, aka Andarna's kind. Cure Xaden's Venin curse. And forge allies to help fight in this war with the Venin. Here's this mealworm you dropped. Girl, you've made a mess. With the main plot points in mind, I was like, you know what, this sounds like a pretty solid way to tell a story. I think these are 3 great goals for the story. However, we don't find a cure for Xaden's Venin curse. We gather some allies, and we don't find the Seventh Den, they find us. Honestly, the Seventh Den stuff was probably some of the most disappointing part of this book, and I'll get into that. I'm just gonna go through the list of things that I wrote down while reading this book that I did not like. Starting off, there was no recap in the beginning of this book. Iron Flame had a lot of stuff going on in it, and then Iron Flame also ended on a cliffhanger. So a recap would have been really nice at the beginning of this book. There's a few series that I've read that have recaps in the beginning to catch you up to speed. I don't think I need to do a full reread of every single book before a new one in the series comes out. I did reread Fourth Wing, and I skimmed through Iron Flame because I made a pretty extensive list of notes for Iron Flame, but I didn't reread Iron Flame in its entirety because honestly, that book was really hard to get through. So there are too many characters in this book, and we need a more thorough character sheet. When I got my copy, I was like, oh, this is lovely. Okay, this is actually really nice to see because, again, there's just so many characters, and there's dragons, and then you also have the flyers, the griffin flyers, and the griffins, and I was just like, there's too many people to really keep track of. I still think that this list could have been a bit more extensive because there was quite a few moments where I was like, who are you? Why are you speaking? And what is your, why are you here? Another part of this book that I found really irritating is that we would get a character would just pop up literally out of nowhere, and everybody would treat this character like they'd been there this whole time, and I would be getting whiplash because I was like, whoa. I was like, I don't remember who this character is. Just because you mention a character like once or twice in the book, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to remember who they are, especially if we don't really interact with them on page at all. I just don't think that's very realistic to expect of any book. Like, if a character is not a main character, then you're going to treat them like they've been there. There needs to be more explanation, maybe a little reminder as to who they are. But then again, it's a little hard to achieve because this is first person narrative. So we're hearing this all through Violet's head. So she knows who all these people are because this is like her perspective. I just think that if you're gonna have the boatload of characters that you do have, and then the whole book is in first person POV, you should have a more extensive character list to help us out because we don't know who these people are. Like, one of my disappointments with this series is I kind of more recently found out that I believe most of the dragons' names are all from Scottish Gaelic, and the pronunciations of all the names are completely incorrect. And I might do another separate video on this because I don't know enough on this topic to speak very confidently in it. But I think that if you're going to take words and places or whatever from Scottish Gaelic, that you should have a pronunciation guide on how to properly say them. But then again, Yaros herself doesn't use the correct pronunciation for any of the names when she does interviews and stuff. Maybe for her, in her head, she thinks that she took these words from Scottish Gaelic and then redefined them or did her own pronunciations for them. I don't really know how to feel about that, if I'm being honest with you, because Scottish Gaelic is a dying language, and I think just like borrowing from it without giving proper credit to that, and then also wanting to honor that by making sure that stuff's pronounced correctly. I have a pretty strong passion for trying your absolute hardest to pronounce things correctly, even if it's not like your native tongue. It can be really hard, but I think like if the effort is put in, that's respectful. But to me, like, this just didn't seem like she didn't put that effort in. So I found it honestly a bit disrespectful. So again, I might do a separate video on that. I might dive a little deeper and look into some things some more because it does kind of bother me, and it kind of soured my experience with this book, with this series in general. A plot point in this book that made the storyline drag was the whole thing with the scenarium, and the fighting back and forth on these missions, because the squad wants to go find Andarna's kind and to forge allies with these isles outside of the continent to help fight against the Venin. So this is an important mission, and the biggest part of it is finding Andarna's kind, because they have discovered that Andarna's kind can power the wards. So like, it's utmost importance to find Andarna's kind. Andarna has a list of requests that Violet has to bring forward to the scenarium to get approved. She gets pushback from these leadership people about who she's allowed to take and when they're allowed to go and how long they're allowed to go. She keeps getting all this pushback. And I think it's done just to like make it seem more dramatic or whatever. But remember, dragons do not answer to the laws of humans, she counters in a tone that reminds me of Taryn. And as my bonded as Taryn's rider, you no longer answer to them either. That's on page 5 that we get reminded of that little nice tidbit. How is anybody going to sit there and argue with a dragon's straight requests. Like, they need to find the seventh den because that's what's ultimately going to save them if they can find them to power the ward stones. Like, you know what I mean? And I know it's probably like, well, you know how political red tape is. I don't care. It read really slow and clunky in this story, and I didn't like it. Milgren's nostrils flare and I bite back a crow of victory. We will consider approving her other requests. You won't consider approving them because she's a dragon and she doesn't answer to you. So how does that freaking work in this society? Like, it can't go both ways, because they'll be like, well, okay, well, we don't have to answer the dragons, but you're the rider, and as the rider, you're supposed to answer to your higher ups and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I know I talked about this in my video on The Dragons Suck, because the logistics behind like who answers to what authority is so crisscrossed and mismatched in this universe that it's so nonsensical, and it's very frustrating to go back and forth on. I personally think it would have been more interesting if some of the dragons of some of the members of the Cenarium, if they were also a part of these discussions and help make the decisions. I don't know why there's such a disconnect from the dragon leadership and the human leadership. Like, I don't get it. Like, shouldn't they be working together? Because again, if dragons don't have to answer to the laws of humans, then doesn't that technically mean that the dragons are above the humans? So shouldn't the dragons be the one making the calls and all this? This is book 3, and we're still flip-flopping around like a fish out of water on this concept alone, and it bugs the crap out of me. I think it just, honestly, it really deteriorates the story for me, because I'm like, nothing feels real and everything feels like it's a joke, or everything feels like there is no real consequences or laws. You can't really get arrested and like thrown in jail, because if you were going off of what your dragon told you to do, they technically can't get you in trouble. Like, I don't know. It's very nonsensical. Bonnie, why are you on my keyboard? Here she is. She's so cute. She's so cute. She's so cute. Give him that good old side eye there. Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh, Bonnie, you have made a mess. The characters in this series are thrown away like trash. So, characters that we lose in this book. We lose Traeger, Aura Benhaven, Quinn, Queen Mariah, I think that's how you say her name, and Professor Grady. Early on in this book, we lose Professor Grady and Aura. There's a point where Violet distinctly says she does not care for either of these two. They've been made to go on their first mission together, and she hates the two of them because they ruin everything. I was like, okay, I don't really like them either. They kind of suck. And this is how Rebecca Yarros gets rid of them. I loathe Aura. Don't really trust Grady after he fed us the serum during RSC training, and I don't know the rest of them. Then, literally 2 seconds later, what's that? That's on page 163. Page 165 to 166. Fi, watch out. Aura's going to... Xaden starts. Don't! I pivot and throw myself at Aura, but the damage has been done. Fire sparks and spews from her hand like dragon flame and engulfs the doorway. Captain Grady is on fire. Aura it freaks out because she can't keep her cool in combat, and she lights Professor Grady on fire, accidentally mistaking him for an enemy. And then, how many pages later? Page 168. So this is just like a couple pages later, a claw reaches for her, and I hold my breath for them to make contact. The claw curls in the same way Terrence does right before he scoops me up. The talon emerges somewhere near the middle of her spine. Blood gushes from the wound, but Aura's scream is silenced as the wyvern drags her lifeless body into the sky. We lost 2 of the characters that Violet specifically said she could not stand. We lost the 2 of them in the same chapter, and I'm like, nope. Don't like this. This is lazy freaking writing. If someone's gonna sit there and be like, oh, well, Violet talking about how much she just can't stand these 2 is foreshadowing, that is crappy foreshadowing. Sorry to tell you, but like, that's so easy and that's so convenient for that to happen in one chapter in the same battle. Get out of here. That is what slowed me down so much with reading this book. I was just like, what the heck is going on here? What the heck? Then we lose Traeger. And Traeger, like, Yarros used this entire book to paint Traeger as this like kind of cool guy, and he was like super into Kat, and Kat was into him. Oh my gosh, Bonnie! Kat was super into him, and Kat was like finally getting her love interest after, you know, not getting Xaden's affection because he really didn't like her when they were together. And everybody was like, oh cool, Kat gets her dude. And then Yaros like kills him off in one of the most, again, anticlimactic, senseless ways. This is rude. Traeger staggers backward. Time slows to a crawl as he turns towards us. 3 fumbling footsteps. His gaze lurches for Kat, and then he falls to his knees and sways. An arrow protrudes from his heart. He's dead before Riddick and I can catch him. I was like, you're kidding me. Really? Then at the very end, Quinn dies. We made it a good one. She falls limp, and when I lift my shaking fingers to her throat, there's no pulse. She's gone. Okay, so Quinn dies. Then Halden, he doesn't die, but he is immediately discarded after Arik takes his position as the new, like, traveling monarch to help gather allies. We don't see anything else of Halden afterwards, so he's, like, abruptly brought into the storyline as Violet's ex-boyfriend, which we knew absolutely nothing about. And then he is like immediately discarded after he's used for, I don't even know what, drama's sake? Because like, I don't really think he was necessary in this either. The writing of this book also really slowed me down because, again, I said that the writing felt very jolty. The transitions from scene to scene were just not that well done. There was several moments where I was like, where the heck are we? What is going on? And people will be like, well, you just weren't paying attention. You just don't know how to read. I do know how to read, okay? But I think the problem is that the writing style is not good. And so I couldn't follow where we were going sometimes because it just felt to me like there was weird time skips and there was weird transitions into a different scene with different characters. The part that really took me by surprise because I really didn't know what we were doing was when Violet and her squad go to mess around with the ward stones to make it so that way the flyers can wield inside the wards. I was like, what are we doing? Where are we? The process of manipulating the wards takes like 2 seconds. It's like a page and a half of description. And they have magically been able to manipulate the ward stones so that way the flyers can live inside the wards and channel. Or wield. No, do better, please. I laughed pretty hard at the moratorium on killing each other. It also serves to remind me that Major de Vera has called a moratorium on killing one another within our walls. There's an enemy just waiting to do so the second we leave. We're now gonna call a moratorium on killing each other. All right.
Okay.
The runes come up again in this book, and I really think that Iron Flame did a pretty poor job of explaining the runes because, again, they came out of, like, kind of nowhere with not great world building around the runes. Like, there's so much hyperfixation on the dragons and the signets and that magical power, but there wasn't as much effort put into describing the runes. There's still times where I was like, I really don't understand why we keep talking about runes when they're, like, such a secondary level. They're like a secondary level, second class type form of magic, it seems, because nobody really seems to know what they are. Like, I don't know. We got more on the runes, but it still like kind of confused me why we're talking about it again, because I don't really see it playing as important of a role as like the signet powers and stuff. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm like, what is the point of going over this again when it almost like doesn't really matter? And Violet, there's like this big thing of like, Violet doesn't know how to do the runes and stuff. And then Quinn helps her out. Maybe you need to manhandle it, really snap the angles instead of bending. Don't coax it into the shape you want. Try a more assertive approach, aggressive even. Get rough when you break the edges and pull hard when you tie in the knots. I roll my eyes and do as Quinn suggested, forcing the power into shape and trying the knots with a pull that's almost brutal. When I temper the rune into the disc, it's not perfect, but it's not the worst either. The runes are cool. Like, they're cool, but again, like, if I'm in book 3 and I still don't quite understand what we're doing with it, then to me personally, I just don't think it's written very well. Let's talk about Xaden's mom. So everybody thought she was dead. I didn't think she was dead. I figured she had to be somewhere else. Talk about anticlimactic BS is Xaden's mom's situation here. There's no conclusion. There's no real conversation to be had between the two of them. There's no interactions with Xaden's half-brothers. Lame. These are things that do genuinely happen to people. There are people who have never met their parents before, and then they find out that their parents are somewhere else and have a family. That freaking happens. Let's explore it. Let's go into like the real raw depth and emotions that you would feel at that. Like they run into each other, and his mom literally just goes, Xaden, Talia whispers, lifting her hand and quickly dropping it. Is it really you? The whole like meeting between them, again, it happened so freaking fast that I was like, whoa, 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 slow down. Like, can we take a second to breathe here and kind of sit in this moment? But no, we're not allowed to do that. And then, you know, when he finally realizes that the two little boys running around are hers, he's like, they're hers, aren't they? His tone slips into icy disdain. Yes, I whisper, holding him tighter as Talia returns to the house without even looking up. The older is probably, what, 11? His arms drop. No wonder she never came back. She didn't just marry, she built a whole new family. There's nothing used about his laugh. I think this could have been a nice moment to take a pause and have a real conversation about this, and then also have like a real moment between Xaden and his mom, but we don't get that. And I'm sorry, like if it comes in book 4 or 5, I'm still gonna be irritated because these plot points just get chucked at us. And then we don't get any payoff for it. We stay in these new plot points for so little of time that it just doesn't, I don't even care. Like I'm not shocked, because again, that's the other thing too, I think, is that nothing that Yaros has done so far has been a shocking plot twist for me. Because I'm just like, my reaction is just like, oh, okay. It's very, I don't know, it's very frustrating to read. And I was disappointed again. I was like, that's it? Like we're not gonna, you haven't seen your mother in how long, and you're not gonna say anything, or you're not gonna, even if Xaden would have had a really heated argument, like, you know, cussing her out, telling her she ruined his life, like, just like something, even if it felt a little on the more adolescent side, I still think seeing a raw emotion like that from Xaden, like that type of reaction, that sense of betrayal, I think that would have been really good to see, because again, it shows, yes, he's an adult, but the hurt from being abandoned by his mother is deep, and it didn't just like go away. He's carried that with him his whole life. There's no cool adventures while flying from island to island. And I'm sure some people could hear me say that and be like, well, what about the stuff that happened on the islands? I'm talking about the traveling aspect, right? They just like travel from island to island with no issues whatsoever. I was hoping for pirates, sea creatures, storms, anything like that to just infiltrate and make this a more difficult process for them, or I don't know, a more engaging story. I don't know if Yaros has ever picked up Outlander, but like if you want to read a book series that gives the characters hell and they have to fight tooth and nail to get anywhere or accomplish anything, the author of the Outlander series does a fabulous job at that. Sometimes a bit too much of a good job at that, because sometimes I get sick and tired of reading about it. However, this book has like none of that, so it's just like they just fly for 12 hours, they're on another island and blah blah blah, and then they fly to another island, and I'm like, where's the struggle? Where's the adventure? Because I felt like this book severely lacked the sense of adventure and discovery. Like, right, they've never been here before. And as they're going to these other islands, they're trying to form alliances with these other islands, obviously to help in this war. However, I got kind of irritated by Xaden's lack of diplomacy. He is a duke, therefore he should be able to conduct himself professionally. And he got to a point where he was just like, insanely unprofessional. And I know some other people would be like, well, that's because he's Venin now and he doesn't have this good side to him anymore. He's not a full Venin yet, and he can interact fine with other people. And if that's his excuse, that he lacks diplomacy and professionalism because he's Venin now, lazy writing. And I'm trying really hard to be diplomatic, since that's the role I've been handed. But let me put this in terms you'll understand. Your king kidnapped our prince, and there's a large part of me that wouldn't mind him staying here and annoying the shit out of you for the rest of his miserable life, but that would make things difficult back home for someone I have complicated loyalty toward. So I'm going to need the prick back. Wow, stunning dialogue. Absolutely moved by his words.
Brilliant.
And kind of wanted to see Xaden take on a little bit more of a mature stance on these things and be more punchy with his words in a way that commanded respect. Not so much that he was just like annoyed and threatening that way. I wanted to see him have a more scary, commanding presence without him having to actually like threaten people, you know, get a little more creative with his body language and his demeanor. I mean, he's Venin now, so he's, you know, his shadows run away from him now because he's so scary. Where is he scary? I don't see it. The whole thing with Andarna's kind. So she's an Irid. That's, I guess, what the dragon type is called. And so they don't find them. The Irids find them on the island. So we didn't even get to go see like where these dragons live. They just show up. 6 dragons of varying scale tones fill the beach, and all of them rival the size of Sigale. Their massive claws dig into the sand as they lower their heads one by one. We didn't find the Irids. They found us. Cool, lame, boring. Where's the adventure? You were left behind is the criterion, the measurement of their growth, their ability to choose tranquility and harmony with all living things. We'd hoped you would return to tell us the humans had evolved and that they had blossomed under the ward stones and no longer use magic as a weapon. But instead you have shown us the opposite. You've become the very thing we abhor, the horror we fled from. My entire interaction was, again, it was very lackluster. It's so brief. It's like we see this mysterious dragon kind that we haven't seen yet, the ones that are responsible for firing those ward stones. Like, we see them for 2 seconds and they're like, Andarna, you're a disappointment to us because you're just as bad as they are. I'm like, this is it. I just wanted more in this book. Again, it feels like, to me, it just feels like Yaros doesn't want to really deeply explore these things. But to be honest with you, I think what it is, and maybe it's maybe it's the writing deadlines that she's put on or whatever, but maybe that strictness and her needing to pump these books out has done her a major disservice, because to me, it feels like she hasn't taken the time to build up any lore with any of these creatures in this world that she's created. Because I have read other books that have good lore behind the creatures and the systems and whatnot, and it makes sense. And it can be complicated, but it still makes sense because the author knows what they're talking about. Again, it just feels like Yaros doesn't know what she's talking about. And so she like blazes through these things as fast as she possibly can. She makes the writing as easy as she can for herself. So like she doesn't have to dig real deep. And I'm like, it just cheapens the story. Later on, Andarna breaks the bond between her and Violet to go off with her Irid family to learn from them. And I'm like, okay, so, supposedly a rider will die if their dragon dies. So I guess that's the equivalent of the bond being broken. So Andarna's family member tells her humans should only be capable of bonding a single dragon, and yet you urged a second connection where there shouldn't be one. Only an Irid can do that. Your instincts are excellent, but you need instruction. Break the connection and come with me. I wrote a note here. Please note, on page 444, Andarna leaves. When the bond breaks between Violet and Andarna, she kind of goes into almost like cardiac failure, and then they're able to get her back. And then she spends the next, 3 days in a state of depression because she's no longer attached to Andarna. This is very dramatic, guys. She's coming back. And because she's an Irid, she probably can just restore the bond. She can do whatever she wants because she's an Irid, right? I don't know what that means, but apparently she's magic. I don't know why everyone's freaking out. She'll probably just restore the bond. Why is everyone freaking out? Nothing in this book is ever permanent, Except Liam. A roar vibrates my very bones, and my ears ring as the edges of my vision darken. My heart stutters, and my lungs cease their struggle. There's no air, and no reason to seek it. I was infinite, yet moored, and now I'm hollow and adrift in waters too vast to comprehend. Andarna left on page 444. Fast forward 74 pages. A wall that snarls. Scales shimmer to the same silver blue as my strike, and a small dragon stalks toward Theophany, her head low, teeth bared. And just like that, my heart stabilizes. Andarna. Okay, so she's back. 74 pages later.
Okay.
I don't remember timeline-wise how long that is in this book. I think it's only a few weeks to maybe a month. You good, Bon? Girl, you've made an absolute mess in here today. I hope you're proud of yourself. So my question was, in the 74 pages that Andarna was gone, did she just learn everything she needed to learn? Or was she like, yo, my people suck and I'm not for them, so I'm bouncing? We don't know. We don't find out. We don't get any explanation. She just appears again and saves the day. This is more of a random note, but how has no one discovered Auric is the missing prince at this college? You're telling me the king's guards and whatever, they haven't been able to figure out where Auric is? This has been a plot point. When did Arik come into the story? In Iron Flame. This has been a plot point that made absolutely no sense to me. None whatsoever. Your secret is still safe, by the way, Llewellyn says to Arik. Though you might consider putting your father out of his misery, he has half his personal guard searching for you. Shows how effective they are, don't you think? Arik grimaces sarcastically. It's nonsensical. It wouldn't happen. Violet's ex-boyfriend, Halden, randomly spawns into this book out of absolutely nowhere. We knew Violet had a previous boyfriend before because I think that was briefly mentioned. I mean, briefly mentioned in Fourth Wing. She never once talks about her ex-boyfriend who was a prince. Halden just, again, like I said, spawns in and he's all like, baby, take me back. You and that Ryerson guy, you're not really that serious, right? Like, and she's like, I literally haven't thought about you since the day I found your professor riding your face. Or riding him or whatever. We didn't need like tons of exposition, but to have Halden have mentioned at all, I think it would still have been better than just like randomly dropping him into the story. I think they dated when Violet was 18 years old. She's like, what, 22? That was 3 years ago. Because here's the other thing too. Like, so she's with Xaden, and Xaden is just like, he treats her so good, and she's 100% safe and comfortable with him. And so here's my, I mean, as a woman, I went through several relationships that were really not so great. One of the relationships that I was in was on a fast track to becoming abusive. There was already mental abuse happening. And I'm telling you what, when I met my husband 3 years later, after my previous relationship, so I went 3 years before I met somebody else. When I met my husband and I was being treated like a queen when I was, and I still am, the first time I felt cherished by my now husband, I instantly thought back to my previous relationships and I was like, this is a literal breath of fresh air. I am so thankful. I'm so happy that I've met somebody that treats me correctly. I thought about my previous boyfriends because, and to be honest, like I compared. I was like, wow, this is what it's like to be genuinely cared about. This is what it's like to not have a man put you down for things that you can't change about yourself. I thought about that. And for Violet to not have made any internal, like, Xaden is so much better for me than so-and-so, and I'm so thankful for that. The fact that we don't get any of that, I just find it very odd. This is my theory. This is my theory, okay? The reason why Halden was never brought up is because I don't think that Yaros, again, had the lore built. Because if she would have had that figured out, I think we would have seen him mentioned before. And if she did have this all planned out, again, boo, bad writing. 2 specific instances of lazy writing is the Isles having no magic and Violet somehow being able to still talk to her dragons, even though everybody else's connections have been cut off. I really think this was a lazy choice. Yaros probably was like, it's kind of hard to make this an intriguing plot line when Violet can't talk to the 2 characters that are always in her head. So I guess I'll have to make an exception and make it so that way, because Andarna's magic that keeps the connection going, but that doesn't make sense because the Isles have no magic supposedly, so how is Andarna able to have magic? I don't know. Well, again, like, it just feels lazy because there's no real explanation for it. I didn't really love the whole part of like Xaden can now have smooshing time because there's no magic, so he can't channel, so perfect excuse for them to be able to like raw dog it, you know? What if we got a little more creative with the shadows? The shadow signet. If we're talking about like intimacy and that kind of stuff, I think they still could have had smooshing time in the regular continent where there's magic, and Xaden could just have gotten a little more creative with all that, you know? He could have used his shadows to restrain Violet in a way so he's not actually physically touching her. Just walk with me here, walk with me here. Because I think the problem is he can't touch her with his hands. He doesn't channel from his, you know what I'm saying? He channels from the hands, I assume, right? Not this, or like his elbows or his head. Just, so what if he could have just like, you know, put his hands behind his back and then done it that way. I don't know, I just would have liked to see something a little more creative. But yeah, we don't get any explanation as to why Violet and why she can still speak to her dragons, but I mean, maybe, I don't remember. Maybe it did say that it was Andarna's connection that kept them all together there, but I want more. Tell me why. Explain things out to me. Build the freaking lore around why this is. Here's a question that I had. Why is Sigale radio silent almost the entire book? We hear minimal dialogue from Sigale the entire book, and people will probably be like, well, it's because she's not talking to Xaden because she's mad at him for being Venom. The entire book, like, there's no interactions. Xaden says, she's still not speaking to me. Flying is awkward as f. She's pacing for some reason. Xaden says as Sigale passes by, not that I can ask her. He huffs a self-deprecating laugh, not that she'd answer. So like, she's not talking to him at all. I understand Sigale being upset with Xaden to a degree, but like, he channeled to save the people that he loves. He didn't channel because he's got this innate, like, I want to be evil. He doesn't want to be evil. He just was desperate and literally had no other choice. And then so Sigale's just going to hold this over his head for the entire book and not take a moment to try and understand and work with him and be like, and be just as determined to find him a cure. And then likewise, Taryn is oddly cruel towards Xaden the entire book, you know, calling him the Dark Wielder. And, you know, when your writer is in a loving relationship with somebody who's made a mistake like that, you'd think that maybe you try to be a little bit more helpful, encouraging. Obviously stay realistic, but not just like treat him like trash the whole book. Because Taryn's, I don't know, I was very annoyed by Taryn in this book. I was like, why is he being such a jerk? Unnecessary. Bonnie, what are you doing? Here she is. Do you want to sit with me a second? Jack Barlow plays no role in this book. The only thing we get from him is like some information at the beginning of the book because Violet bribes him with channeling some energy to keep him alive. I don't know, like she gets some information out of him, but to be honest, I don't even remember what she asks him. Okay, we forgot about Jack the entire book. And then Jack is used as a bargaining chip with Theophany at the end of the book. So he's like randomly brought back and given to Theophany. And I don't even remember how that ends because I don't remember where he goes or what happens there. Again, like, if I can't remember this stuff, it's because I don't think it was written very well. And again, stuff in the plot, it's just thrown at you and then taken away. I did write a note. Why do we keep having to go back to Basgiath? I think this book would have been so much better if it would have been like a true adventure story outside of the continent. If the majority of the book would have spent time outside of the continent, exploring the Isles, meeting the people, learning the culture, building alliances, searching for that seventh den, finding the seventh den, having to form an alliance with them, walk on eggshells, that kind of thing, because it's a very tentative situation. I just think that I wanted more time spent out on the adventure. Like, we should have seen pirates or, again, sea creatures or like another form of dragon. I don't know, something, anything. But we kept having to go back to Basgiath, and I was just kind of like, we were at war here, people. We don't have time to go back and learn skills in the classroom settings. We got to start putting, you know, boots to the ground. But I don't know, I just got annoyed with the whole, like, let's go back to Basgiath after every other chapter. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sick and tired of having to like deal with that BS. I had another question. Why do we get so much more of a thorough explanation for the religion of this book series? We heard briefly about the religious system in the first book, but it never really seemed to matter or mean much to any of the characters. And then all of a sudden, it's a big deal in book 3. And people are like, well, that's because it's world building. The world building is happening. No, the world building happens in book 1. And then it's expounded upon throughout the rest of the series. Why do we bother bringing up a religion when it doesn't really seem to have an actual effect on any of these people, or none of them really seem to believe in any of it anyway? To me, it just reads like Yaros didn't have the religion figured out. And so now that she's on book 3, she's had time to think things through some more and actually build lore. So that's why it's coming into play now. But I still think that's lazy writing because you should have had this stuff figured out by book 1. Like, I shouldn't be having to learn basic constructs of your society in book 3. Like, that's just my personal taste, I guess, because apparently a lot of people think it's fine. Your temples to Malik and Dune are disproportionately large compared to the other gods here, Traeger notes, leaning back in his chair, except Amari, of course. And again, I don't even remember which god is which god and what they do. And also, we don't see the gods in any way, shape, or form, at least not yet. So there's never been a scene where like somebody went to a temple and like worshipped, or somebody offered a sacrifice of some sort. There's never been anything like that. So it's just like, is the religion that important to these people? I don't understand. And I again, like, it needed to be explained out better. And it's still, book 3 we got more world building around that, but it was still pretty minuscule. So I still don't really understand the whole system. And you know, come on. We have tension between Mira and Violet that takes place on page because a big chunk of this book too, or a big plot point is Violet having to get these books that her father wrote that were left for her on these other islands, and they're left only to Violet, and Mira kind of takes offense to that because she's like, why didn't my dad love me as much? And so like there's tension between the two of them, which I was like, yeah, there would be. Let's explore that more. Let's have some heart to heart. Let's have some real conversations. Mira is here in the story, but like we don't really get any really great interactions between Violet and Mira, or even Brennan. Like Brennan's just here and there every now and then, but there's like not good, heartfelt, let's break this down. Both of our parents are gone now. Let's talk about it. Our parents weren't who we thought they were. Let's talk about it. For a book that's so dialogue heavy, I feel like it totally avoids the like important heart-to-heart conversations that truly cause character development and growth. Violet downplaying Xaden's Venom side was kind of annoying too, because she's like living in this illusion that, yeah, he channeled once, but like it's not so bad. Like she kind of pushes his buttons a little bit and she tries to reassure him that it's not so bad and whatnot. But like I found it just a little bit agitating to read. You know, after the first time they tried to get intimate and he ends up channeling from the headboard, she's like, that's nothing, it's barely there. And his eyes look exactly the same from this distance. Whatever he did wasn't even close to what had happened during the battle. Well, yeah, but still like it's a problem. So, you know, maybe stop putting him in positions where he's a risk for that. To be honest, I just really don't think enough was done in this book to search for Xaden's cure. It was a major plot point that felt like it got pushed to the side. Speaking again of like random things that are just dropped into the story out of nowhere, the citron that gets brought up, I straight up was like, what the heck is this? I've literally not heard this mentioned or brought up before. In regard to your search, King Cortland of Deverelli has agreed to a single meeting, noble blood only, for the reasonable price of an Emilian citron. Queen Mariah has agreed to gift the gem to him, but will not be responsible for its retrieval. Promise display in Anka. Please let me know when you have the citron in hand so I can schedule out a visit. So they go to Anka, and retrieve the citron. And that was another plot point that I was like, what are we doing? What's a citron? Why do we need it? Halden, oh no, I don't remember who tells, maybe it is Halden that says this. The Emilian citron is a lesser magic amplifier worn by the members of the First Drift. That's like the only real explanation we get for it. So I'm like, so why does this person need this for sure, for sure? We have Theophany, who is the big bad of book 3. I don't know if I'm saying her name right. We see her early on in the book, and then Violet gets multiple letters from her of her being like, come join me, come join the dark side. We have so much more fun over here. You can have everything you want. And then Violet's like, no, I can't. And like, so we get that back and forth several times, but we don't really spend much time with Theophany. We learned that she was a heretic because she was a priestess of Dune, and then she ended up channeling and becoming Venom, but we don't really get any lore behind her, like where she came from, how she turned Venom when she was a priestess of Dune. Violet having to answer riddles to get the books her father left for her, I found quite annoying. And then the third question is, what made you leave the prince? Violet's like, because he was a piece of trash and he cheated on me. So you left him in a jealous rage, even with the crown of Navarre in your hands, Narelle prods. Did he come begging your forgiveness? Did you take him back? I can definitely see why she owns a bookstore and which genre just might be her favorite. I'm like, what is this? Why is some absolute stranger straight up sitting there asking Violet about her romantic life? Like, none of your business. Violet's hair is brought up as a main point because now we finally learned that the reason why her hair is the way that it is because she was dedicated to Dune, but the dedication process wasn't complete, which is why her hair is like ombre effect.
Okay.
Violet didn't get a chance to go and ask and dig and remember, she's a scribe, so she knows how to research, and she doesn't get a chance to sit down and talk to some of these people and figure out these things for herself. We just randomly get it mentioned and then we move right on from it. Panchek's big reveal at the end of this book, where he's the one that was betraying everybody to Theophany, I'm not surprised in the slightest that this is a direction that Yaros went. So we find out on page 364 that Theophany has known about where Violet and everybody are going off to. And Violet's like, somebody's leaking this information, but who is it? Honestly, I was kind of hoping that it was Xaden. I kind of thought that, I was like, Xaden's got to be informing the Venom of what's going on because he can sense them. And now he's got this he's like got to answer to them. And then it turns out to be Panchek. And I was like, okay, for what, for where, for why? How is this possible? Because Panchek is a dragon rider. He has a dragon. And he's got a connection with the dragon. And the dragon can hear and know his thoughts. So how was his dragon like, yeah, dude, totally make a deal with the Venom. That's super chill with me. I'm not going to have any issue with that. Did I miss something? Does Panchek have a signet where he can secretly hide his thoughts from his dragon? Cheap, low blows. And I didn't even care. I was just kind of like, all right, cool. What consequences are there? There's none. There's no consequences. I think it would have been far cooler if Xaden was the one that was providing the information to the Venom, because he is Venom. So that would have played into the whole he's morally gray. But no, we couldn't do that either. Make it interesting that way. Being in Violet's POV all the time is torture. I will go once again say I think this book would have benefited greatly from hearing from some of the other characters, and not just at the end of the book, but interspersed throughout the book. We get these real zingers from Violet. He hands me his reins, turning those gorgeous gold-flecked onyx eyes into weapons capable of melting the underwear straight off my body as he looks up at me. Stop! Madness. This need between us is always the sweetest madness. He is the craving I'll never sate, the rush I'll never get enough of. Only him. Cue Madness by Muse. Madness. Reading Violet's perspective all the time is madness. Madness. Different POVs out of nowhere at the end of the book really ticked me off. I brought this up briefly before, but I think that this book, maybe I didn't, I don't remember if I mentioned this before, but this book, I think, would have really benefited from multiple POVs, or to be told in third-person narrative, because we have so many characters. I actually want to know what's going on with more of these characters. I hate being inside Violet's head all the time, and to be truthful with you, I think Violet's POV cheapens the story and makes it way more boring, because I'm only hearing from her. I want to know what Sawyer's up to. I want to know what Rhee's up to. I want to know what Brennan's up to. All these characters do go off and do different separate things. Like, I want to know what they're doing too. I want to know what their romantic feelings are towards somebody else. We get hints that like, oh, you know, like Imogen and Garrick, they like each other. But I'm like, I kind of want to know from their perspective what that looks like and how they interact. Adding in other people's POVs out of the absolute blue at the end of this book, I don't like. If we would have gotten POVs from Rhee and Imogen and stuff like that throughout the book, they would have been made more sense to jump back and see like where they are now during the battle and whatnot. I'm sure some people have theories and reasons why Yaros did it that way, but you want to know what? I'm so fed up with the whole like, well, Yaros did it this way, she's foreshadowing this. I don't care. I don't believe it either, because I just think it's lazy writing. Another note on why I think that the multiple POVs or third-person narrative would work better is there's a part in this book, I'm going to read it to you. Apparently, Xaden and Brennan got together and they tried to figure out how to cure Xaden of the Venom curse. And so they did a whole slew of things to cure Xaden, completely off page. We didn't see it. We didn't know what was going on. And that made me mad, because I was like, sorry, I actually wanted to see Xaden get some answers and get a cure for being Venom, or at least make some progress in that direction, and we didn't get to see that on page at all. But that was supposedly, remember, that was one of the 3 plot points for this book, but we didn't even get to see it. We just get a mention of it.
Okay.
We tried silent offerings in every local temple, pushing magic back into the earth, and even sitting with the eggs in the hatching grounds. We tried everything either of us could think of. All right, let's talk about things in this book that I did actually like. The stupid dragon tails. I hate the dragon tails, but we get to see them in action. Terran dips his wings at an angle, catching the wind, and I hurtle forward in the seat at the sudden decrease in speed as he swings his massive tail. Bone cracks, spurts, and the wyvern spins off to the right, missing the lower half of its jaw. Cool. Atrum's tail curves up, the poisonous barb jabbing into the belly of the wyvern. I blink. A scorpion tail? I'm pretty sure those are the only 2 instances in the book that straight up mention the shape and the weapon of the tail and it being used in combat. So I was kind of disappointed by that, but I did appreciate actually getting some real use of the ridiculous dragon tails. We also get more dragon combat scenes, I think, in this book, and they're a bit more descriptive and actually make you feel. They're still very much lacking. You know, Terran passing out, that was kind of cool. His side hits first, the collision stunning me breathless and knocking boulders loose around us with a cracking sound. Something slams into my knee and Terran's wings snap over me a moment before I hear a second thud of impact. One of my favorite parts of this book, and I've seen it said and echoed by the majority, is Riddick. Now, I've seen a lot of people sit there and say that they like Riddick because he's funny. He's funny from time to time. Sometimes his dialogue is a little bit too cringy. However, I have a fondness for Riddick because he very much reminds me of one of my childhood best friends. There was a scene in this book that made me really like him a whole lot more, and it was seeing him be a really solid friend to Violet. The scene where he finds out Xaden is Venom, he kind of loses his cool and he really gets in Violet's face. No, he's not evil, I lift my chin. He's not him either, he counters. That's why you stepped in front of him in Hedotus. Are any of us ever in control, I start? Don't do that, he points a finger at me. Not with me. There are 4 ranks to Dark Wielders, and your man's already channeled 3 times. I think 80% is mathematically generous, but sure, we'll live in your delusion for the purpose of the hypothetical. How long do we have until he's in a sim? Until he's physically unable to deny the call of a sage? Just because I like to crack jokes doesn't mean I'm not serious about reading the same shit you do. There are no accounts of initiates just walking away from power. That's why I have to find a cure, my voice breaks. They just told us there isn't one. His arm swings towards the beach. Riddick's shoulders dip. So where's the line? At what point is he too far gone for you to defend him? Not good enough. Give me a real, logical line he has to cross for you to walk away, and I'll keep the secret. I'll help you scour every book you can find. Never said you couldn't love him, he squeezes my shoulder gently. You can still love someone after you let them go, but you have to tell me there's a line where you will let him go, because if there isn't one, it's not just him we're going to lose by. Stop keeping to yourself, he demands. I don't want to have this fight again. The 4 of us are stronger together than we are apart. Don't fuck with that. Even for Ryerson. If you're too afraid to tell Rhys, Sawyer, or me about something you're doing because you know we're going to lose our shit, then either you shouldn't be doing it or you deserve to have lost on you. I really appreciate Riddick drawing hard lines with Violet because honestly, he's kind of like been like the first person to like really, well, I don't know if he's the first person, but he really gets in her face, calls her out and says, you have to make a boundary. There's got to be an ultimatum here because he is Venom. We have to acknowledge the elephant in the room that Xaden is Venom. He's dangerous and he could potentially channel again and that could send him over the edge and then he might be irredeemable. We might not be able to get him back. And I need you to be thinking clearly and logically about this and you have to tell me what's the line. And of course Violet tells him like, well, the line would be if he hurts me, then we would have to reason that Xaden is too far gone because he wouldn't hurt me if he wasn't overtaken by the Venom power. I really liked Riddick bringing her down to earth and giving her a reality check. Honestly, I do really enjoy the small details of physical touch between Xaden and Violet and how he also started calling her Love in this book. I have a soft spot for the nickname Love because that's what me and my husband call each other. I remember like early on, me and my husband, we used to call each other Babe all the time. And then as the years went on, it just developed into Love. And now I call him Love like all the time. Both of us do. And I think it's cute. But yeah, I just like the small details of the physical touch too, like because I think that helps build a sense of intimacy without everything always being like them smashing. Intimacy is so much more than just that. So like looks of physical touch, understanding body language, those are big things that I love to see. And I think those were brought up enough in this book that I was like, thank you. Xaden stands next to Professor Kaori in the doorway, casually leaning against the frame with his arms crossed, a tiny yet undeniable tilt to his mouth as our eyes lock. You already hold my soul, and now you want my pain. Getting greedy violence. He brings my hand to his mouth and brushes a kiss over my knuckles before letting go. I love knuckle kisses, they're adorable. I had something else in mind. He glances toward the throne. Yes, please. I flick my wrist and shut the door using lesser magic than lock it. His smile instantly becomes a core memory. I appreciated the mentions here and there of them looking at each other, making eye contact. That helps build the relationship. Honestly, I did not hate Professor Xaden. I actually thought it was a fun way to build the tension between the two of them when he's doing the signet thing and he's got his shadows up and he's like dipping in and out of the shadows and he's like, you have to find me. And I was like, I don't know. I think that stuff's kind of cute. I'm kind of cheesy that way though. Although I do have to say that this like they've got to live by this code of conduct. And Violet's all like, well, we can't have a relationship now because, you know, there's a code of conduct in place and students can't sleep with professors. And I was like, okay, this school allows children to murder each other. I live by you. When have I ever given a about the code of the codex of the code? The codex or the code? Okay. I live by you, baby. When have I ever given a about the codex or the code of conduct? He cradles my face and leans down, resting his forehead against mine. I am yours and you are mine, and there's no law or rule in this world or the next that will change that. I genuinely enjoyed Xaden's demeanor relax once they got to the Isles and they weren't around magic anymore. I did appreciate that. I still think maybe it was a little bit too brief. I would have liked to sit in that moment a little more. I did appreciate the acknowledgement of Xaden having like a weight lifted off his shoulders because his brain and his mind is quiet for once. Xaden stands with his feet apart, sword strapped to his back and arms crossed. But when my shoulder brushes his elbow, I look up to find his place completely, totally relaxed. I appreciated the conversation between Xaden and Violet when she's feeling insecure and due to failing at being a leader. And Xaden tells her, the best leaders are the ones who never want the job. I hate to break it to you, but you were selected by a general among dragons. You can choose to step into leadership or he can drag you. Either way, you're going to end up in the front. I did like him being honest with her in that way and telling her like, girl, you gotta step up. You gotta do this. You don't have a choice anymore. Lastly, I liked that Xaden and Violet got married at the end of the book. I saw a bunch of people who were like, oh, I don't understand what happened. Like, is there a misprint? Did it end at the wrong spot? And I was like, no, it didn't end. It ended, I'm like, I thought the ending was pretty clear actually. Like, you know, I've really not had great things to say about this book, but I actually liked the ending. I think it was cool to do a little bit of a callback to Imogen's signet of memory wiping. I liked that we got to see it being used on Violet and that kind of sense of like betrayal that comes with that. My eyes flare. We're married? 1,000 emotions try to force their way through my jumbled thoughts, but the immediate rush of awe trips right over the logic of how. There's no way I'd forget something like that. Why isn't he here? Where did he go and why? What did you do? My head snaps toward Imogen and a deep sense of foreboding takes root in my chest. She slowly lifts her gaze to mine. What you asked me to. I thought that was a great cliffhanger ending because it's a little chilling. Xaden and Violet clearly agreed to get married. We know this. We didn't see it on page yet. We better see it in the next one. So clearly they agreed to get married, and then to protect Violet so she has no idea where Xaden went, Imogen was asked to wipe her memories to a certain part. So they agreed to that, but then obviously when Violet wakes up, she doesn't remember that. So that would feel like a punch to the gut, like a sense of betrayal, even though you did agree to it. And then you can tell that Imogen feels conflicted about this. I thought it was good. I thought the ending of this book, that's probably honestly one of my favorite parts, was the ending of this book. Not just because I finished the book and I don't have to like read anymore for a while, but because I think the ending was actually kind of cool. Oh boy. Those are my thoughts on ONYX STORM. Obviously, I had more negative things to say than positive, but that's kind of how this entire series has gone for me. I lament what this series could have been. And that's why I've continued to read it. And there's chunks, there's parts of this series that I do really like. And I lament that it didn't meet the expectations that I had for it. To be honest, even though this book was also a disappointment, I think I will read the next 2 books because I am invested to know what happens. I keep hoping in some way that Yaros will write something in such a way that ties together all the puzzle pieces in a way that makes sense, but I'm very skeptical that she will do that in a way I find sufficient because I think that her lore and world building is poor at best because there's too many open-ended questions and it doesn't feel like there's any real consequences for things or like things are this way because if you don't do things this way, this is the result or this is the consequence. It falls really flat. I think the dragons are really poorly done. We're supposed to like, though there's a sense of mystery around the dragons. I don't think there's a sense of mystery at all, if I'm being honest. I just think it reads to me as I didn't know what I was doing with this series, so I just went this route and now I'm kind of backpedaling and changing my mind. But now I'm seeing that like logistically this doesn't make sense anymore. Like it just doesn't read well. I just finished reading His Majesty's Dragon. I might do a video on this one. This is the first book, and I think a series of 9 books, but this is, you know, a dragon rider type book. And the dragon bonds in this are beautiful. The relationship between Temeraire, who is the dragon, and Lawrence, who is the rider, is so sweet and it's so cute. And not only that, but it has legitimate lore and world building around the breeds of dragons and where they come from and how they're bred, and there's descriptions of how the dragons actually look, not just colors, but like physique. And I went into that in my The Dragons Suck video, where I was like, the reason why the dragons fall so flat for me in Fourth Wing in this series is that there's no differing physiques that go along with the different weapon tails. So it just feels like nonsensical, boring. These dragons have different types of combat depending on the type of dragon that they are, which I'm like, that's super freaking cool. This is a very cool book. At the very end of the book, there's a man in this world. His name is Sir Edward Howe. He's the scholar that writes about all the different types of dragons. His work is published, and so he's renowned for his knowledge of dragons. And at the very end of the book, it has a section from the sketchbook of Sir Edward Howe, and it's got like actual pictures of dragons, and then it's got a selected extracts from observations on the old order Draconia in Europe with notes on the Oriental breeds. So it's like literally out of one of his books. I'm like, that's super cute. And it gives descriptions on the different dragons and their physiques and whatever, you know, all that good stuff. And then it also has illustrations of the different types of dragons. Cool. Yaros could have done that. She could have been like using that as like extra material and building the world, and that has not happened yet, and I think it is massively disappointing because it would have been so fun, so cool, and maybe we'll get something like that eventually, but I'm a little bit skeptical that we'll see something like that. So I continue to try and find Dragon Rider books that are good. I just ordered, was it the Dragon Riders of Pern, I think, which was a book that came out in the 80s. Gotta love it. I've heard really good things about that book. I think it's a series as well. So I just ordered that. And so I'm just gonna keep on reading these style books and comparing them to Fourth Wing and why I feel that kind of stuff falls flat for me. If you want a book that has better world building around dragons and then dragon rider relationships, I think this is a great book. It was good. ONYX STORM was not good. Not my favorite. Kind of a letdown. Disappointing. Again, like I said in the beginning, I don't hate it, but I didn't love it. Thank you so much, everybody, for sticking around and listening to me talk about what I didn't like about this book. If you have any other good Dragon Rider, Dragon Fantasy type books that you loved, leave those in the comments. I say this as if anybody watches my videos, but there's like 2 people. So, to all 2 of you out there, mwah, you're the real MVPs. Anyway, thanks guys again for joining me today. I'll see y'all in the next one. Toodles!
Reach for the stars.